what would make this worth it is that at the end of the day, Jason gets to say Jason believed in himself. That Jason's put, like, even if he goes bankrupt, family lives with mom and dad again and has to redo everything and sell home. At the end of the day, I could walk and be like, no, I chose to take a risk. Good job, Jason. I believe in you.
Welcome back to the Hard But Worth It podcast. Today, we're really excited to have Jason Odell with us. Jason runs I would argue he runs the best barbecue joint here in Redding.
Yep.
But that's not really his goal. I think we're going to get into this idea that being the best in Redding was never Jason's goal. I don't know what he would want to be the best in at this point, but it's a destination barbecue joint that he's been working on for, how long have you been working on this now?
6-7 years-ish, like right in there. It kind of all blurs because it started in my backyard.
Right. And I'll tell you a personal story. I remember, I've known Jason for a very long time, and I remember 10, 12 years ago swapping stories about barbecue because I'm a backyard barbecuer. And I can remember the moment when I decided I was never going to talk barbecue with Jason again because he's using words I didn't understand at all. And I'm like, okay, he's way beyond me.
Yep.
And that was more than 6 or 7 years ago.
Yeah.
So I'm a little disappointed today because you didn't bring any good food to eat. So Kirk had to go out and bring some whiskey for us all to drink. Or
Well, whiskey's great.
what's going on with the food, man?
I want a rib.
That's right.
Just got to place an order.
So tell us a little bit about 6-7 years ago, maybe back to the backyard. Like what was that Jason doing at that point?
Yeah. So, I mean, just a couple really early stories. I mean, as a kid, my mom's a great cook. And my granddad was this outdoorsman where we'd go camping and he'd have this awesome outdoor kitchen. So I grew up around two really good kind of backyard chefs. And my granddad would put a big old fire out, put a big grate on it, cook tri-tip, right? And then breakfast would be eggs, bacon, and all that kind of stuff. We never went out to eat as a kid, right? Like it was special. You know, we go Costco dogs like once a month, and that was like the highlight. But my mom was always cooking food, and so I was jump in the kitchen and help her out quite a bit. And then kind of fast forward a little bit when I first get married, around 22, I get a Weber. And I was like, I want to learn this smoking thing. And a Weber, supposedly, you can smoke meat out of a Weber. And I made a chicken, and I got it really smoky, like this awesome, like dark gray black, smoke coming out, and like diesel. Think of it like a diesel truck, right? Like, and my wife and I are sitting down and eating it, and I'm like, wow, this is like so much better than those gas grills. And my wife's like, yeah, it's great. Yeah. Later, she told me, she's like, yeah, that was the worst chicken I've ever had in my life. So gross. I was praying that you would just never get into this thing. And I thought it was great. I was like, it's smoky, like, and it was terrible actually. Now
So I got to interrupt real quick.
Yeah, go
Lesson number 1 of starting something great is suck first.
Yeah.
Something like it's okay. No, it's okay to suck it first.
So one of kind of my things that I say is your first one's your worst one.
There you go.
And from there you get to be better. So just knowing that your first try is going to be probably terrible, and get it out of the way. And so from there I just started getting I get into these subjects sometimes, and barbecue is one that I just haven't gotten out of. Who's the best? Who's the best author? Who's the best in the world? What can I learn from them? At that time, YouTube there wasn't that much about barbecue on YouTube. So it was a lot of Amazon books and whatnot. Really one of my first, and I'm a big book guy. I got probably 400 or 500 books.
You're a 5 on the Enneagram.
I'm a 5 on the Enneagram. That's correct. So I collect a lot of books and I read a lot of books. And so, and specifically on leadership, business development, those kinds of things, and then also barbecue and food in general. But one of my first ones was Adam Perry Lang, who's this barbecue guy that not a lot of people know. He's still not on YouTube. And I picked up he's a French trained guy that got into barbecue. Really detailed. I mean, his recipes are super long. So I started just trying out his recipes, and I was turning out some good food. And then another guy I picked up was Aaron Franklin. And he's funny because he has like a 300-page book. He has about 6 recipes, and only about like 50 pages are recipes. It's like, chapter 1, the smoker. Chapter 2, the smoke. Chapter 3, the wood, and then the fire, and then so it's just the level. I really loved both of those guys because I really I love that kind of detailed. It's like the why behind the why of what's actually going on. So when you're talking about like, I'm not going to talk to Jason about barbecue.
That's why.
That's why, because I've gotten to understand what's happening at a very chemical level and the transformation that's happening.
It's also why people eat my barbecue for free and yours is worth it.
Thank you. And so, so I just started every time I had an opportunity to cook, I would. And I have a lot of family in town. So every birthday, every Christmas, every Thanksgiving, I made a point to just do the meat. And then I think what really kind of started shifting was my barbecues weren't good enough. I can't, it's kind of like golfing. At some point, it's like, I'm better than my clubs.
Like your equipment. Yeah. Got it.
You're like, I'm actually better than my equipment, I think. I feel like it's holding me back. So I told my brother one day, I was like, I think I want like a UDS. And UDS stands for ugly drum smoker, right? It's ugly. It's a vertical smoker, and you can make it really for a couple $100. Make it at home. And so for my birthday, my brother actually made me one. It was awesome. He showed me the day before. I was super stoked. Went to the butcher shop, bought meat for the whole day. Got up at about 4:00 in the morning, and we got breakfast going. Got a brisket on, and we just did rounds of food for the whole day. And it was awesome. And from there I got let's see, I did an event. It was my first event for about 100 people. We had that smoker. It was a men's group, and I was pretty scared, to be honest. Like, it was a free event, right? But I'm scared because it's Jason.
Well, it's a bunch of hungry men too, right?
And they're playing sports all day, right? And so a bunch of hungry men, and I mean, quickly I realized my smoker's definitely not big enough. and there was another like little barbecue nearby that had like a little charcoal grill, kind of Santa Maria style is what it's called. And so we leveraged that. My mom helped me out by she printed off like the recipes. So I had a whole crew of guys I was running that know nothing about cooking. And we were probably about an hour and a half late and doing rounds of cooking. And I remember about midway through the meal, the guys started standing up and cheering. And applause, and I was like, I don't think that happens typically, right? When you're
that's called validation.
Yeah, it's a serious customer validation.
And so it was a powerful moment. And I looked at my brother. I'm like, we need a bigger smoker for next year because they're going to do this event next year. And so guess what? Next year, we built another smoker, and this one we don't know how to weld. My brother did like a class in high school once. So we bought a welder online. I sold a pickup truck for about $1,000, picked up a bunch of free stuff, a bunch of cheap stuff. And we, over a span of about 6 weeks, every Saturday and Sunday, we welded this giant smoker that was awesome. And I remember pulling the first brisket off there and going, oh yeah, that's way better equipment. Like it was just so different. And we went back to that event and crushed it. Even more than the year before. And then from there, I did a wedding. I remember my first wedding. And again, kind of being nervous and not knowing what I was doing, I sit down with them for coffee and we're chatting, and they're like, they don't have very much money. They're calling all these places. It's like $22, $23 a plate, and it's 100 people. I'm like, all right, well, how about this? This is my first wedding. You pay me to do all this food at cost, and I promise I won't kill anybody. Because that's a real thing. Let's be honest. That's why we have health department type stuff. And there's a deal, and I'm like, I get some experience, and that's nice. And get to learn some stuff. And
so you go from free to break even at this point,
exactly.
Something like that, right?
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
a massive upgrade.
It's a huge upgrade, right? Cool. Getting people to pay you to learn. Right. I mean, that's way better than going to college, in my opinion. Right. Where we're going the other way, and in this case, I'm getting paid to learn. And so I get my mom on board. My mom's, again, a good cook, and she's actually developed a lot of our side recipes.
Oh, yeah.
You have a dish.
I just have to say, the best macaroni and cheese, Mama Odell. I'm just saying, kudos. I didn't know what mac and cheese could be until I tasted that mac and cheese.
Some people think of it as a kid's thing.
No.
And if it's done right, it's delicious.
It's bomb. Yeah, really good stuff.
Yeah. So moving from there, we did that wedding, and it was the compliments were, "This is the best wedding food ever."
Yeah.
And again, it's another validation. And at this time, like career wise, I'm doing mortgages full time.
Okay.
And I've learned a lot about sales, and that was a whole interesting career shift as well. Getting into that space, and I was kind of the part-time weekend hobby, and I guess this one of the things I remember that shifted is at this time I had my daughter, and I wanted to be home more on the weekends, which sounds funny, but I was golfing a lot at that time and doing stuff on the weekends. So I was like, well, if I do barbecue, that's in my backyard. Be home on the weekends, smoking meat. It's a little bit different now. It's a lot different now.
Yeah.
But back then it was like I could be home smoking meat in my backyard, and then
sweet.
take it to a wedding or whatnot. Or so that was kind of like some of the early days. And what I think one of the big shifts equipment wise was when we built that big smoker, and I fired off a few weddings that way that year.
So when did you know you were at this point where you had to jump in with both feet? Because I remember you left the mortgage world, which was a bit of your security. You were, paying your bills way.
I was making good money.
Yeah, you were. Yeah. And then to jump out of that into this and risk, when did you know that was the time to do that?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I was wrestling that for years. So going into that, I mean, again, big fan of leadership and those kinds of things. So I've spent a lot of time and money around coaching and seminars. And I think to answer your question, one of the shifts was around, going from breaking even to making money. And it was actually my wife, right?
Wow.
Your spouse could be really powerful.
Thank God
partner.
for our wives. Huh?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. She said it this way. I think the way I remember, I should say it, the way I remember it, it was, you need to start charging people. If you're going to be gone, you need to start making money on this. Yes, ma'am. And so I got to start charging people. And it started to shift some things. And so one of the big shifts for me was actually a seminar I went to, if you don't mind.
This is Clemmer, right?
Yeah.
Yep. I remember this.
Yep. So it was a 2.5 day seminar. And
what's it called? It's personal mastery.
Personal mastery is the 2.5 day. Yep.
Okay.
And so with that one, my struggle in that before I went in, most of my wrestling was before going to that class. Here I'm a mortgage guy making good money, known as the mortgage guy, or somewhat known as mortgage, not known as really a barbecue guy at this point at all. And in that class, you're supposed to set a 90-day goal. And I know what the goal should be. The goal should be mortgages and making more money because that's responsible. That's how I take care of my family. There's a bunch of business people in the room. I can make more money that way. And that just made me like kind of disgusted inside, like a little bit of me kind of like, and so, but I knew it's what I should be doing. Right. And I was like, but what I want to do is set a goal around barbecue. And it felt like a childish thing to do. Like that was the labeling I was doing in my own mind. So I remember really wrestling with this up to that week. And one of the exercises you do is you go around and be like, hi, my name is Jason Odell and my 90-day goal is, and I have him, my first person I get across is a realtor where we do business together and I get business from, and I'm like, F word.
I got to out myself.
Yeah. And so I'm like, my name is Jason Odell and my 90-day goal is to book 10 or more catering gigs.
Please keep sending me work.
And he looks at me and goes, awesome.
Huh.
I was like, oh, that was weird. I wasn't expecting that at all.
Wow.
And so for me, I enjoy seminars and all those things and self-development and growth. I came out of that weekend and fired up. And on Monday, I walk into a local coffee place, The Stirring, and I know who's the manager's in charge just because I have coffee there a lot. And I like, we need to meet. I need to talk to you. So we sit down. I'm like, listen, your food here is crap. It's terrible. Everyone knows it. And she laughs too because she knows. And I'm like, I could get 100 people here. My barbecue's awesome. And we'll do a deal where you guys make money. We all make money and they'll come in and buy drinks. It'll be awesome. What do you say? You're like, let's try it. And then I walk out, I'm like, oh, dear God. I just said I'll have 100 people
That's
here.
right.
And, I think it was, a few weeks later, we do that event and we crushed it. I mean, huge line. I think Kirk was even there.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And it was packed. And,
what you didn't know, what you may have known, but what you didn't know is we were all waiting for that line. You were the barbecue guy to an inner tribe, not to the as big as you are now, and it's like as soon as that happened, like, oh, thank God he did it.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember you coming back from that Climmer event and being so lit, like we ran into each other and you're like, I set a barbecue goal, like I'm doing this thing, and you were just effervescent with this thing. It was awesome.
Yeah, and I would say that one of the mind shifts that happened was I went from because before that it was people would tell me, are you gonna start a restaurant? I'm like, no, that's stupid. Why would I do that? No one makes money in restaurants, blah, blah, blah. And the shift went into, what if I could? What if I could make money? What would that look like? It wasn't a huge shift, but it was just this small enough shift to be a little bit of belief of possibility. And that was kind of all I needed to let's go test this out. And that booking 10 events, I did that in 2 weeks. I had a spreadsheet, done.
You did 10 events in 2 weeks.
I booked them in 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's what I mean. You booked them. So the big goal, this big scary thing that was going to take you 90 days. This is important because when we make those first initial goals like that, it's not uncommon. Sometimes it doesn't work out this way, for sure. But it's not uncommon that we set a goal that feels impossible. It's going to take forever.
Right.
And it's like, bam.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is. And it sounds funny to talk about it now.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, right?
Yeah,
this is 6-7 years ago.
Well, in a week, I mean, we book so much more now. It's ridiculous.
You book 10 a day sometimes, right?
Sometimes, and some of them are very, very, very large. Yeah. So from that event, I just decided to actually prospect in barbecue, and that was probably the big shift. And then it probably took me 2 years to get to your question. In the beginning of 2019, I stopped prospecting in mortgages. I didn't tell my boss this, but I was like, he found out later, but I was like, I'm no longer trying to whatever leads come in, great. However, I'm going to prospect only for barbecue moving forward. I started to basically, it was the same spreadsheet, but way cooler now with, all these formulas. And I remember one of my last loans I did, I got my first lowest star review, which was 4 stars, by the way, because that's really bad for me. And the lady's like, Jason was really sweet, really kind, all that kind of stuff, but he was hard to get a hold of. And I was cooking a lot, during the week and on the weekend at that point in 2019. The point that I realized it's time to shift was, one, my mortgage pipeline was next to nil. And my 2020 bookings for catering showed me that I was going to double, maybe even triple what I did in 2019.
Wow.
And that's the beauty thing about catering. You talk about, people think of us as a restaurant sometimes. The truth is, on the restaurant side, that's only about 20%, 15 to 25%. Most of it is catering. And the beauty thing about catering for me was it gave me a place to start with, $1,000 from the truck I sold to make the smoker. Yeah. And from there, just, keep leveling up. So that was the shift in 2019 that I made at the end of 2019. Another cool story off that was, my boss, Chris Lamb at Commerce Home Mortgage. I remember during the summertime sitting down and have a conversation. I decided to tell him where I'm at and what I'm actually doing. And it was a powerful moment because he actually went from full support. Yeah. It was a really cool, and he still is. I mean, he comes and buys things and hires us to do things. And we weren't always that close. I mean, there was times where I was like, I don't even know if I want to talk to this guy, but it was just this moment where when I just opened up where I'm at and this is what I'm doing, and this is where I'm going. Again, it was like awesome. How
Yeah.
can I help you? And he kept me on the company just to support me and my family.
Wow.
When he could have cut me, I mean, he could have cut me right then if he wanted to, right?
Yeah.
And he did.
Yeah, Chris is one of the most championing guys, right? He's such a good guy. So really cool to see that. You know, I wonder too, like you're talking about the end of 2019. The obvious question is you jump in and 3 months later, if you had a crystal ball, COVID hits, right? Would you have jumped in? Probably not if we were doing it in our own way. But how did you navigate that? Because you jumped with this sense of triple, you know, your income, at least forecasted. And then 3 months in, you're going, things are changing pretty fast.
Great question. So it's funny leading up to this. I mean, it's looking awesome, right? We're in March. We're about to do the largest catering event we ever had, to the point where I think I had to send them people that they would talk to see if they feel like we could actually do it. And I think actually Kirk was one of those people. I said, is Jason capable of feeding 500 plus people in Chico?
Yep. It was huge.
Yeah. And they found us through a website. And so I'm like stocking brisket at this point in our fridge. And we're renting a space at a commercial kitchen, which that's a whole different story when I got in trouble, going from backyard to commercial kitchen. And so then the shutdown happens and I just go, okay, what can we do? It's not illegal to feed people. You're just not supposed to have large groups, and all my catering gigs are starting to cancel. So I was like, well, what can we do? And the funny thing is I actually had a website developed from a buddy of mine to do pre-orders, because I know in the style that we do, pre-orders make a lot of sense. You know, we're cooking fresh food. And so if we can get them to pre-order ahead of time, it's basically a catering gig. So I call him up. I'm like, hey, can you launch that website we've put on the sideline for the last 3 months? He launched it on Saturday. And by Tuesday, we sell out from what we just have in stock. And we just made a really simple menu. I think it was just brisket and a couple of sides. It was like a few grand, right? So like a good sized catering gig essentially. And I'm kind of shocked. And there's only me and two other people working at that time. And I'm like, well, maybe it'll work again. Right? Like, what else are we going to do? Right. Yeah. So we go and I try and find as much product as I can. And still it works again. And then we do it. I'm like, well, maybe it'll work again. Right. So then week 3, it works again. And I remember week 3, I was like, there's some people who are bought 3 weeks in a row. That's crazy. I'm going to call them and thank them. And this one lady I call up, I'm like, hey, this is Jason Odell from Odell Craft BBQ. You bought 3 weeks in a row. I just want to say thank you so much for supporting us. She's like, you don't understand. She's like, we look forward to this every Friday.
Come on.
I'm like, this is weird. Like, and it was just this moment of like, wow, what a mutual benefiting relationship, right? Where we're actually like super grateful for each other. And there were several families that bought many weeks in a row. And Friday night barbecue became a thing. And what's funny about 2020 is we still doubled our 2019 numbers in terms of gross sales.
Wow.
Mostly doing things like that. And some things kind of opened up in our area. So we were able to do some catering or some weird stuff, but mostly through that Friday night barbecue, and just created a whole system for pre-order. And yeah.
Have you kept the pre-order revenue stream now that we're kind of through it? Or
we have, and it's very different. So in those days when people are stuck at home, they will pre-order a week or more in advance. Most people like to pre-order in this area a few hours in advance.
So you have to guess on how much to cook.
So we're still, So again, going back to the Thursday, Friday, we do pre-order on both those days. We do walk-in on both those days. But more importantly, what we do on those days is we'll book 5 to 7 tastings a week. And that usually gets us a 75% closing ratio, sometimes a little bit higher depending on the week. Some weeks are more profitable than others on the restaurant side, but this is where the catering is so important, because the catering is where we're just really good at catering. Yeah. And so when it all opened up, it just went bonkers.
So in 2019, it sounds like you had you and a couple people supporting you.
Mm-hmm.
How many? What's your team size now?
Yeah, so I have kind of a little bit of a longer answer. There's about 4 or 5 of us that are full time, and then I have another 15 and during our busy season up to 20 that are kind of a part-time seasonal team.
Yeah, servers on the catering jobs and that
On the
kind of
catering,
stuff?
yeah,
Okay.
because our busiest Saturday we've ever had was about I think it was around 9 events and right around 800 people in total that we fed that night. And so we ran multiple crews and a few we had to invent positions essentially to make sure all the crews had support. And
That's what I'm curious about, that growth as you've gone from guy in the backyard on the barbecue to now. Well, I'm not sure how to describe what you do now. You'll have to tell us. But I'm guessing you're not sitting on the barbecue 24 hours on a 24-hour cook anymore. You got this whole team now. How did you engage in the development of a more complex system? And more importantly, what I'm really getting at is, how did that shape you as a leader?
Yeah, so to answer one of those, first and foremost, I think about, okay, what is it that I actually want? Which is actually a really hard question.
Second hardest question in the world, I would suggest.
What is it that you want? Do you want to be on a smoker all the time?
Okay.
Which I do enjoy, by the way, and I still do, but not nearly as much. Or do I want something much bigger than myself? Because if I'm on the smoker all the time, it's pretty limited to just me. And so I made a decision it's probably like going into 21 when things started to take off, as things started to open up a bit, that this gets to be bigger than just me, because I want something I could share with more people and really build a space for the team to really bring into. So one of the tough decisions was to get off the smoker and not be the key, really the quote unquote pit master, and really teach and develop. Tristan is actually the guy. And what a lot of people don't know, that he's been the guy for the last year plus. He orders all the meat. He makes all the decisions. He makes the game plan. When I run pit, I'm going off his game plan, what he and the timelines he created. And I'd say this, no one knows in terms of, they can't really tell the difference. Like, he's really learned to cook in the Odell style, I guess.
Yeah.
And that was a process.
Yeah.
And he's great. He loves it too. Also an introvert. It's an introvert job.
It is.
And so he's been key in that. And to go back to your question, it really become about, what is it that I want? And then what are ways that I can get there?
And what is it you want?
Yeah. So big picture, it's changing, but I went from being a barbecue guy, starting out and making a little bit of a living to creating, and now it's moving into creating multiple hospitality spaces. And that's where it's going, big picture. And so the mechanism that we've been using is catering, because I've just see a huge opportunity in the catering space, and so we've been taking full advantage of that. I've really enjoyed building team. I've been building team for really probably 18 to 24 months is where I've actually been focused, where it went from making really good barbecue to making really good team that make really good barbecue.
Yeah. That's a huge transition.
It really is.
So as you move from the spot of doing the technical work of barbecue to building people and building teams, what challenges did you face in yourself making that shift?
Yeah. So at the surface level, which is a good place to start, as I would step into quote unquote leveling up or moving into more conceptual people work, I found myself really uncomfortable and wanting to step back down and just run that smoker and do what I know I'm good at and love. And so there's a real wrestling of, when I'm in that space, now I'm not creating vision. I'm not creating cohesiveness. I'm not actually building team. The wrestling became being okay with being uncomfortable, holding to the bigger vision of what I'm creating. And really just, the word is surrender.
Okay.
In some sense, or just knowing that I'm going to get comfortable in this it's just, I get to keep moving in this direction because it is what I say I want. And it is what I want.
So now you've said the word uncomfortable and comfortable in the same paragraph, right?
Yeah.
What's that? What's going on there?
It's moving from, so when I look back, I like to think of myself as an average person, but that's not true because I'm pretty weird. I like to take things on and put myself in a growth space. And that's very uncomfortable. So moving into what I know to what I don't know, it's for the sake of growth, of getting bigger, stronger, but also more compassionate, more loving. And that's really uncomfortable. But as you practice into that space, it becomes comfortable. And that's how I was using both of those.
Well, I think the difference in that too is, when and if, you can only answer this question, but when you made that decision, did you make that from the deepest intrinsic place of value that you own? If so, then we know that that's more of a sacrifice you're willing to make. You're saying yes to this, which means I'm saying no to some things, but it's motivated from a deep place of what you want.
Yeah.
Sometimes we can make those decisions because it's what we feel others expect of us. I should be doing this. I really want to be the solo guy. I'm good being in fun. I want to be more vertical in my business. It's going to grow that way. I don't necessarily want to push it into scale mode, but I'm going to push it into scale mode because I need to be the big dog. But then we get out and we're forcing ourselves into paying a price, maybe more punishment because it's a price, but we're not really making it from our own deep place. Is that more of a deep motivation for you to push yourself there because you know you need to grow? It's something you want to do?
Yes. I want to make fun of your question, but yes.
Yeah.
Because it's a yes, no question, right? Yes. And I think just tagging on to that, one of the things that I actually I enjoy growing, and I know that that's uncomfortable. There's nothing comfortable about growing into spaces where riding a bike, learning to drive a stick, you get to make, was it first time's the worst time?
First time's the worst time.
You're gonna be a fool. You're gonna look awful doing these things. And then at some point you're not. And now you have another tool in the tool belt. You've grown, you've expanded. And so to touch on that, I enjoy developing myself and becoming a much more rounded, better person. But I also enjoy that with other people too, and creating space for them to jump into that.
Sure.
And so one of the beautiful things I think about the team that I've created, or I should say the space and culture that I've created, I've invited these people to, one of our company values is growth mindset. We're going to make mistakes and that's okay, but it's not okay not to learn from them because we're going to learn from them. And on a growth mindset, we get to receive feedback. And sometimes it's things that maybe we really enjoy to hear. And sometimes it's things that we may not enjoy to hear, but both of it's extremely valuable. And so we practice giving each other feedback. And we take all customer feedback very seriously, no matter what side of the fence it happens to be on, because they're telling us something that we may or may not be seeing. And it's so, I literally will give people, especially even bad, quote unquote, bad feedback. I don't like that language. Again, big language guy. I don't like that language because I think it's all good in terms of useful. I'll give them like a big old refund and a gift card, and they're usually like, "Oh, I don't need that." I'm like, "You don't understand. You just gave me like $1,000 of feedback. You can have $30 coming back because what you gave me was so important." So, touching on that is why I realized one of the things I really enjoy is building and I don't want to say developing people, but creating space where people can grow and really become better versions of themselves.
Yeah.
But it starts with me.
Yeah.
And by me focusing on that, I create space for other people.
I love that so much because what you're doing is you're pulling what many people might see as a otherly place. And we tend to do that work in the off the clock hours, right? So I got to show up to church, or I got to go to some extra curricular activity, like maybe a university, to really get into these spaces of developing myself and other people. But what you're doing is you're pulling it right into the work world. And I think when we see those two things align and merge, I wonder if we are the most fulfilled, because most of our time is spent in the vocational place on the clock. And as a leader, you being able to do that, I think pulls us into a place of meaningful work that many of us miss because we just can't see it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's like one of the ways that it shows up in our space. People will be like, "How? Like, are you losing people? Are you having a hard time finding?" I'm like, "Not really. we're doing." In fact, I mean, we get people on a regular basis asking if there's opportunity to work for us, and several of our team has been around. I mean, Tristan's first time I hired him was probably 6 years ago. It's so much more than just putting good food on a plate.
Yeah. And it's more than just a job. You get to do what brings you life. You're coming alive by bringing others into a space to grow and see them maybe go further than you, and you get paid for it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a win all around. And I think another space that we were talking about before in that Climmer space,
what is Climmer?
Okay,
You're throwing this word around, but what is that?
Yeah, sir.
It's good.
Thanks,
It's good.
Thanks for the question.
Yeah.
So there's a seminar company called Climmer Seminars, and they have a series of 4 seminars and a couple other products as well. But they are a leadership development company, or growth development company, whatever wording you want to use. And they do it through experiential seminars.
Yeah.
And there's 4 of them that you can choose to do in that order. I've been through all of them multiple times. One of the things I actually do enjoy is once you go through a seminar, you get to go back for free. So to me, they're lifetime tuitions.
Right. That's cool.
Yeah. And you're often playing at a staff level or a staff level helping out. And so with that being a really big impact with leveraging a lot of the tools and things I learned in that, I've brought a lot of the seminars in Reading, a lot of people have done. And I actually, a lot of the tools I've learned in there, I've implemented as well into the business
Practices, in fact. Yeah, you run 2 of those a year now, don't you?
So we usually do 2, sometimes more in the Reading area.
But they're all over the country, right?
All over technically the world, but mostly Canada and US.
Okay. I hear you saying you're highly dedicated to your own personal growth.
Yeah.
That's the want. That's the desire.
Yeah.
What's been the resistance or inhibitor you've had to overcome to activate that desire?
So in one word would be self.
Wait, you?
Jason. Yeah. Surprise.
What does that mean?
Yeah. So, okay. So first thought, before probably in my 20s, and especially moving into barbecue and a lot of the work I've done, I had probably the most, I'm going to give myself the champion of worst self-talk. Right. No one could beat up Jason more than Jason could in my own mind. And it was a real interesting notice. And so I was, in some cases, I would say I was my worst enemy. And at times I still am. The things that prevent me from moving forward is Jason. COVID's a really good example, right? Oh, this horrible thing happened and shut down all these businesses. But Jason didn't stop me. Jason's like, well, what if this? Let's try this. People still got to eat good food, right? Mm-hmm. And they did. And like I said, we doubled sales that year, in the worst year ever, right?
Yeah.
Even though all of our bookings got canceled.
What have you learned about overcoming that, Jason? That is it a part of you? Is it?
It's definitely a part of me, right? So I think
we don't want to fix him. No. It's the wrong language, right?
Because it's not necessarily wrong. Like at its deepest level, it's about protection.
Okay, right.
Right. It's about keeping Jason safe from harm, and however that can get overplayed. And if you think about it, during caveman years, there's a lion, we got to run.
Totally.
But now it's like I got to talk in public. which is not a lion, right?
Turns out death's not on the line.
Yeah. But it feels like it is.
Yeah.
Right. I used to be scared to death just to put my food out in front of people.
Right.
That was really scary. Very vulnerable. Like, here's my masterpiece for you to judge. Please like it.
Yeah.
And if you don't, please tell me you like it. So going back to your question on this, on one hand, it's really locating what the fear is, and is it moving me forward, or is it holding me back? And taking that realization of, is this holding me back from where I want to go? And if it is, what can I do to shift? And sometimes it's just, again, language. The difference between excitement and fear, and we just think about this. I mean, both of those, your heart rate goes up, your palms get sweaty, right? Maybe butterflies in the stomach, like kind of shaking a little bit. It's just the belief and story you're telling yourself. That's it.
The exact same chemicals, right?
Yeah.
Or hormones or whatever that is.
Right. The same thing, the same chemical, your body's reacting the same way. And so, I mean, honestly, a lot of times just changing my language tells me a different story. Yeah.
We were hanging out. This has been years ago. I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but you were in the process of learning public speaking. You were taking that on, and you were doing stuff in different environments, and I would watch you do that, and it was scary, super scary. But public speaking has always been something I've just been able to do, and public speaking is like a top 5 fear or top two, right? It's
2 or 1. Yeah,
it's so common, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't bother me. And so I was watching that journey. At the same time, I was learning to kayak, and so I bought a bunch of kayaks, and we were out doing our thing, and we went from lakes to rivers, and that's a big difference. And because lakes basically don't have an opinion, and rivers do.
That's true.
And lakes scared me when I first started, because I was in a kayak that was 21 feet long and only 17 inches wide. And that's not true, 21 inches wide. I'm pretty sure I'm like 27 inches wide. So you fit yourself in this thing, and they're super tippy, and it's scary. And so, but you've been a rafting guide, and you've done all kinds of stuff on whitewater. And so I invited you out one time. I'm like, hey, we're going to go down the Sacramento River. It's super mellow, right? And we're going down the river, and we're about halfway through it. And I come up next to you or whatever. And you look over at me and you say these words, it's kind of boring. And I'm like terrified. I'm terrified of this whole experience. You're like, it's kind of boring. And it dawned on me that when I'm in a kayak, I have an adrenaline rush, and I'm afraid I'm going to die. And you were bored.
Yeah.
And then I correlated that to when Jason's on stage, I think he's telling him a story that he might die or something like that. Mm-hmm. And when I'm on stage, I know what to do with that adrenaline rush. I know what to do with it, right? And I was like, oh my gosh, I could learn what to do with that adrenaline on a river. It's the same adrenaline. Mm-hmm. And it was a really profound moment for me for how terrified I was of something that was actually boring.
I think one of the things is like you're taking the same circumstance with different people who have different experiences.
Totally. I'm catastrophizing something, right?
Right.
And you're like, snooze fest.
Right. I'm used to like class 3s and 4s and those kinds of things. And that's pretty chill. And it's the stories that we tell ourselves.
It's just a story.
Yeah.
I have yet to die on a river.
It's that moment where it's like you realize you just bit into a ghost pepper, right? It makes you cry. It makes you sweat a little bit, but you realize through it all you survived, and maybe even feel like a badass at the end of it all. Where's that moment in your journey where you just go, man, I was crying, I was sweating, but I got through it, and now I realize I've got a little bit of confidence under my belt?
So definitely a lot of tears in a lot of spots. Let me just cover that. No joke. And sweating and tears. I think one of the biggest shifts was the shift that we around going from, is this a part-time business that I just want to keep on the side for fun, or am I willing to take the risk and going full-time? And that was a good, I mean, there was a lot of months and tears put in that, but there was one moment where I chose to do this exercise called fear setting. And I just, again, bit information guy, TED Talks, YouTube, books. And so there's this fear setting, You can Google it and find it out. And there's an exercise you can do. And it starts with, what if I ... And so what if I go full time into barbecue, quit mortgages? And there's a series of questions. And the one question that that I was shocked by my own answer was around, if I were to do this, what would a base hit be? Not a grand slam, because that's obvious, but what would be an at-bat swing at the ball? What would that be? And I thought about that, and I was, wow, what would make this worth it is that at the end of the day, Jason gets to say Jason believed in himself. That Jason's even if he goes bankrupt, family lives with mom and dad again, and has to redo everything and sell home, at the end of the day, I could walk and be like, no, I chose to take a risk. Good job, Jason. I believe in you. And that's what ultimately why I decided to move forward and make that decision, because that was important to me.
Yeah. Wow.
So you said you were the king or champion of negative self-talk.
Yeah, I think I did say that.
That is the champion of a different kind of talk.
That's right.
That's having learned to speak a different language to yourself, right?
Yeah. And if there's any real big shift, I think when I think about what I used to say to myself and now what I say now, just really choosing to believe in myself, know that I'm capable.
Yeah.
I now believe I could do anything. Like, I think I'm actually capable enough to do anything that I want. I don't necessarily have time to do everything, but I can do anything. And then the question is, what is it that I want?
Yeah.
What's the biggest vision that I could see? And then orient myself around that.
Well, and I think it's fair to say too, like the negative talk, it never really goes away. I think it's necessary, at least for me, it's necessary for me to acknowledge that when the negative talk shows up, it's usually because I'm stepping out, reaching into a further space of the unknown. You tell the dragon story. But these moments where I'm expanding my borders, and now I'm in this, well, I kind of know this is out there, but I've never really discovered it or explored it myself. That's where usually I find the negative voice starts to show up again. And I've actually begun to identify that this is an indicator that I'm pioneering. I'm being entrepreneurial or apostolic or whatever, visionary. And I need that in my life and I use that to actually motivate me to say, oh, you're actually moving and taking territory. This is where you belong. You need to be here. When I'm not hearing those voices, it might be that I'm playing it a little safe, staying a little small. Now, I don't accept it, but I look that voice in the eye and I go, okay, let me pull that into my narrative and use that as energy.
So I do want to make a little bit of a distinction with that fear piece. What I was doing was getting extremely negative towards myself, pulling out kind of the golden hammer and just beating myself up. And there's a difference between stepping into something new and uncomfortable and feeling that fear and really shaking, right?
Yeah.
And having some doubt in there. Those are very different pieces. And so early on, I was more in this really just pounding myself negatively versus, oh, I'm just uncomfortable.
Would that cause you to not take action?
Right.
Is that one of the metrics maybe of like a fear that's so overwhelming you don't move or you? Yeah.
So and it's fear. Ask that question specifically. Are you talking about the fear in which?
Actually, let me say it this way. This is one of my favorite, there's many favorite Seth Godin lines, right? But he makes a distinction. It's language stuff. He's trying to play with language here. And he makes a distinction between fear and anxiety. And he says, anxiety is pre-living failure. The lived experience of, if I go do that, I will fail. There's no other possibility. It's like pre-lived experience, where fear is just an emotional state of that can focus us, but we still move into it.
Okay. So what I would say is what I experienced before I really decided to push into this wasn't either one of those.
Oh,
it was more of like self-shame to unbelief. You can't do this. And then what would happen is I would actually paint this picture of what I don't want and what I can't do. So when I would step out and maybe fail somewhat, Yep. See, told you.
So it confirmed a suspicion, but it wasn't a suspicion. It confirmed a conclusion you'd already come to.
Yeah.
That kind of experience.
And it was a very heavy, I mean, I basically painted the picture negatively.
Totally.
Versus going back to the fear thing. I mean, I definitely scared. Like the things we're moving into now, definitely scared. And I get shaky, and dashboard lights are coming up. And then I get to decide on how I want to shift.
Sure. Yeah.
What does shift mean? What do you mean by that? How do you want to shift?
Yeah. So, going back to the excitement versus fear, the story we're telling ourselves, a lot of that fear and anxiety is based on a story that may not propel me in the direction I want to go. So if I'm afraid of going, let's just say, going to a full restaurant scale, surprise, surprise, right? The fear that comes with that might be a story of what if it fails? What if it's not going to happen, right? So there's a little bit of that happening of these what ifs, and the shift becomes who's it do I want to be? Not so much around the doing, but who is it that I want to be and step into that will help drive where I want to go.
The doing and the being in that equation are really, really critical. And that's a complex dialogue, but there's a difference. There's a difference between failing at doing something and failing at being something. It's this, like, we're totally allowed to fail at doing things.
Yes.
It's not what we would call fun, or it depends on your perspective on it, right?
Well, let's go on this. If I could touch on this failure piece, that's how we learn.
Correct.
It's
like
super crucial.
Failure's data, right? That idea. But part of our framework is that you cannot fail at being you. You can hide it. You cannot activate it. But you are you. One writer says that we have this great amnesia, and the growth, the process of life is to grow into the memory of who you already are. That idea. And that's a being statement. The process of that remembering of who you actually already are, coming to grips with who you already are, requires a bunch of doing that doesn't always go well. And is that failure? Sure. Let's say sure to that. Yeah, it didn't go well. Or I would say when we are critiqued by others as not having created value in the present moment. Like, that wasn't good enough. Are you good enough? It's a very different question.
Very different question. And I think this is one of the things I struggled with is if I didn't do something well, it means I'm not well or good.
It proves something that is a belief. And you can't prove, this is foundational how I think about this stuff, is belief can't be proved right or wrong. If you believe you are not worthy of love and acceptance, I can't prove you are, but you can't prove you aren't. It's a belief set, and that's being language. And when I go out in the world and I do something that isn't, we'll say, good enough, that's a thing. That's happened before.
Yeah.
Quite a bit. Can I learn from that? Yes. Can I learn to show up as a better version of myself? Yes. But that self that I'm showing up as is already in me. It's already on board. And it requires doing stuff that doesn't go well to figure out what is already on board. There's things I'm not good at. It's just, never hire me for that. But what am I good at? That kind of an idea. It's complex. It's hard. It takes a lifetime to figure this stuff out.
Yeah, and I think most of us, when we start the journey, we're not thinking that philosophical. Like where we just went, like I can get lost in that swirl for a bit. Most of us just start out because we feel a deep pulling in us that there's something more. And that something more becomes a journey of us discovering ourselves, not just trying to arrive to a destination, but really the journey is us discovering who we are along the way, and then eventually growing or not growing based on decisions we make. And eventually the conclusion is, will we be prepared to carry the thing waiting for us when we finally arrive there? Well, that's usually the work we do. But we don't know that when we start. We just see the peak. We see the restaurant. We smell the smoker, right? We get the vision, and then all of a sudden we're on this journey of discovering who we are and confronting the inner self. Hopefully, if we do that work, when we get there, we're ready for it.
Yeah. I love how you talked about Franklin's book. You said there's like 6 recipes in it?
6
or
to 7,
right?
yeah,
Something like
somewhere
that.
there,
So
yeah.
it's like, I'm going to go to, I want to know how to barbecue. Give me the recipe, give me the formula, right? That idea. And I see him on YouTube. I see what he's doing. Like, it's amazing. His line is forever. He's world famous, all that stuff. Give me the recipe. And he's like, yeah, no.
Well, he does give you the recipe. It's salt and pepper. Literally, that's the magic of his brisket is salt and pepper.
But the recipe, the bean work, again,
really understanding what's going on behind the surface, right? What's going on underneath, from the very start to the finish.
and that's what mastery looks like, right? And in
It's
our
kind
own,
of like cooking a brisket. You just can't do that quick.
Right, this is correct. Unless you grind it up and turn it into hamburger. That's your other option, because it's an awful piece of meat.
I don't know how many thousands of briskets you're in. But one of the things that struck me is you were talking, I don't remember the context of this, but just the notion of, I'm like, this is really good brisket, Jason. This is amazing. And you're like, I'm not even to 10,000 briskets yet.
That's so
There's
funny.
no possible way it could be amazing.
It's like a pilot counting their flight hours,
Something like that.
Yeah, it goes into that mastery piece of like, so we talk about mastery, and I know you guys have in some of your other stuff. For me, it's being a student. It's being in that space of there's more, and as you uncover, there's more, and it's never going, all right, I figured it out.
I'm good.
Yeah, because I think we just talk about barbecue for a second. Sometimes there's people who go, oh, I got this recipe, I'm done. But my space is, what if we tweak this?
Yeah.
What if we move? How can we get this to go just a little bit different? And it's more this discovery and curiosity that really, like the beingness would be this curiosity of there's more here. How do we uncover more?
It's entirely possible that in this journey of self-discovery and self-improvement and growth and development and personal mastery, that we actually are a piece of brisket.
So I do have a metaphor with brisket. If you
Are you calling me a piece of meat?
I would. Careful.
Well, to touch on that, I do paint a picture with brisket that a lot
Yeah.
of people don't understand. So going to some of so brisket, for one, is a terrible cut of meat.
Right.
It's full of connectivity tissue. It's full of a lot of the chewiness. So the reason why you have to cook it low and slow is you have to break it down and get the internal temperature up really hot. So the interesting thing about brisket is about halfway, when you go to cook a brisket, it takes roughly 12 hours. Now, you wouldn't think this if you're monitoring the temperature inside, because in about 3 or 4 hours, you're at about 150, and right around somewhere around 200 up to 215, depending on internal temperature you need to go. So if you're already at 150 in 3 hours, you're probably going to be done at lunchtime. Not the case. So what ends up happening is the brisket sweats. It actually gets to a point where it stops cooking from an internal temperature. The measurement in which we use to call quote unquote done is pretty useless, and it's called the stall. And the brisket can actually drop in internal temperature. And what's actually happening is all that connectivity tissue that makes it tough and awful and disgusting and really hard to chew turns into gelatin. And that only happens at low temperatures and time. And so there's a few hours of where nothing happens, or it goes backwards and then it picks back up. And that's actually what takes it through the process. And so one of the interesting things about the story is that oftentimes you might be, and for me, I'm coming from mine now, where I'm thinking I'm actually going backwards.
Right.
I'm doing the work. I'm in the effing cooker doing what I'm supposed to do.
Nothing's working.
And the results are actually opposite of where it should be.
I was supposed to be done by lunch. I'm supposed to be
really
there by
good.
now.
Yeah.
Like, I'm 32 years old. Why haven't I? I'm 38 now. Why haven't I? I'm like, I'm supposed to be done.
That's it. And they stay in the cooker. You're there. You're doing good. Trust the process.
Yeah, it's really good.
So we're all a piece of brisket.
That's
And the recipe is salt and pepper and heat over a long time
process
to be tenderized. What is what actually gets a piece of tough brisket to actually taste so good?
So again, going back to our recipes and stuff like that, the recipes are relatively easy. It's the process.
Yeah.
Right. So, and this is the beautiful thing about barbecue is to me, good barbecue is around what's the process to get it where it is. So brisket, we and Aaron Franklin use salt and pepper. The process is this low, slow, literal transformation of connectivity tissue. And this is the same thing with ribs and also your pork shoulders and those kinds of things. Those really tough pieces that you wouldn't actually even, you wouldn't eat on a steak or anything like that transforms into gelatin using a lower temperature over time. That and gelatin, that's what they make Jell-O out of. That's that buttery mouth feel that melts in your mouth, and it can hold an extreme amount of moisture in it as well.
Which is flavor, right?
Tons of flavor. Yeah.
Seems like we've come full circle here. And feels like a good place to wrap this thing. Thanks for being with us, Jason. If they want to get a hold of you and find out more about what you're doing, how do people find you?
Probably the best way would be on Instagram. That's at odellcraftbbq.com or BBQ.
ODELL.
Yep.
BBQ.com.
Yeah. Well, Odell, ODELLCRAFT BBQ.
Odell Craft BBQ.
Yeah,
You're not just,
yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, that's one way you guys can reach out, message us there. We have a website.
What's that?
That's the odellcraftbbq.com
Cool.
website. I mean, I guess they could text me. I'm totally cool with taking on text messages.
What's your number?
530-356-8900.
All right, people. Text Odell Craft BBQ. If you're in the Western United States, you need to make a trip and come out and have some of his food. If you're in Northern California, he'll cater your next event.
Yep. And don't forget Mama Odell's macaroni and cheese, baby.